is the impact both will have on our national debt. Should taxpayers be worrying? Hi, everybody. I'm Dagen McDowell. This is Bulls and Bears. The Bulls and Bears this week: Gary B. Smith, Jonas Max Ferris, John Layfield, along with Emily Jashinsky and Jessica Tarlov. Welcome to everybody. Emily, you say hold on to our wallets.
Yeah, absolutely. So conservatives like myself spent the Obama administration, spent the administration of George W. Bush talking about how the national debt, it's so big, it's a civil rights issue. You know, it's going to burden our next generation of young Americans. And this bill, we're looking at perhaps the most, the opportunity for a true conservative administration since probably Ronald Reagan. This compromise increases funding to Amtrak. We're funding D.C.'s Metro. We're continuing to fund the IRS at the same level. We're funding all of these government agencies. It's not worth what we're doing to our national debt. We did get some cuts. We got some cut regulations in coal country, maybe breathe a little life into that industry. But if we want to seriously tackle the national debt, this administration has an opportunity to take the right steps. This is not the step in the right direction.
Gary B., you love the government spending your money. And that's what they're doing with that $1 trillion spending bill.
I'm going back to November, Dagen, and now I understand the strategy. Lose the presidency, lose Congress, lose the Senate, get whatever you want. Winning, that would be it. I mean, I looked through, this is a bill, I mean, Obama and Clinton must be, all the Clintons must be smiling, because this bill, everything Trump wanted to cut remained. Emily pointed out the Amtrak funding. He wanted to cut something called Pacific Coast salmon farming. That stayed in. McConnell got some pork for Appalachian miners in there. Puerto Rico gets bailed out. Look, all this stuff sounds good. It's all mom and apple pie. I get it. We're out of money. Instead of shrinking the government, instead of small government relying on what government should do, we're back to the days of free spending and FDR and say, hey, let's just get a W out there, which I wanted, but at the cost of, as Emily rightly points out, the deficit and debt are going to explode. It's a horrible, horrible budget.
And Jessica, you must love it.
I'm not unhappy. That healthcare thing was pretty bad, but if we're just talking spending bill, then yeah, it was a good week for Democrats. I'll just add to what Gary was saying to say that also Planned Parenthood was protected, sanctuary cities,
I forgot
the
about
EPA.
That. You're right.
I know. Well, that's what I'm here for, Gary. What else have we got? We got an extra $2 billion for the NIH, which should be a bipartisan issue there, and I think everyone would be happy about that. But we did get increased military spending, and there was more that's going to border security, not for the wall specifically. What I would say, though, that I think is interesting is whether something went on behind the scenes between Republicans and Donald Trump, who has really made it clear that he doesn't care about reining in entitlement spending, whereas Republicans do. So I feel like that's going to be a struggle intra-party, more than anything, actually, on the Republican side.
John, I worry about the debt all the time, and I don't understand why the people in Washington think this money will be free-flowing forever, particularly as interest rates start rising, right? Then the debt burden becomes more and more severe.
Yeah, and the cost of the debt burden has masked this problem to a large degree. When President Obama took office, debt essentially doubled. Now, it doubled under President Bush, too, so it's not like it's a Republican or Democrat issue. All these guys spend way too much money. They just don't. All they care about is getting reelected. So when President Obama took office, the debt service was $340 billion. You double the debt, and because interest rates have gone down, it's only $342 billion, only $2 billion more 8 years later with double the debt because interest rates have gone down. So you mask the repercussions that you have to deal with. And now this is just absolutely more of the same. We had $2.1 trillion in revenue the first year of President Obama's rule as president that we took into federal coffers. There's going to be $3.9 trillion into fiscal year 2008. It's almost doubled. But yet we still have $350 million projected as our deficit. No matter how much money you give these guys, they're going to spend more. And sooner or later, you've got to deal with this or we all become Puerto Rico.
It blows up in our face. But, Jonas, I will point out, if you look at the health care bill passed in the House, it cuts spending by $1 trillion, and it takes a huge chunk out of Medicaid, which is entitlement reform, which Jessica was referring to.
Right. Like, the problem there is unlike this defending bill, which did pass, which increased things like the defense spending went up $19.9 billion. That sounds less than $20 billion. I guess they learned that from the retailers. The healthcare, look, Obamacare had a lot of problems. There's no question about it. But huge deficit hits wasn't one of them because it had this tax component to pay for the spending, the Medicaid increasing, and everything else was kind of jiggling around who's paying for higher premiums to subsidize other people. They are going to, if it passes, get rid of the tax increase, but the Medicaid expansion, that's not going away overnight. You get grandfathered in, it's a few years away. So you're going to see once they score this thing, probably a higher deficit, at least for the first few years, than if we just left it alone. So this Obamacare light they're kicking around, which again probably is not going to pass if you look at healthcare stocks, which are still expecting all this expansion to stay in place, is going to have some deficit impacts over the next few years as well.
So, Emily, what Jonas is saying is even when they say they're cutting, well, they're budget tricks that you kick those cuts down the road to 2020, maybe even further, depending on what the Senate does with that health care bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would actually anticipate something very similar to what Jonas just laid out with the ACHA, the bill that was just passed. And when you look at the budget, these are all things that you just, unless you take, again, this administration is a huge opportunity for conservatives, for conservative leadership, for fiscally responsible leadership. And you cannot continue funding things like the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, PBS. They sound good, but we have $19 trillion to take care of, and we're going to have to take some tough measures.
Why does that have to come out of the arts budgets? This is what I don't understand. It's as if conservatives, you don't enjoy the arts. You don't want your children to have programs in schools to promote creativity. It's very odd. Now, you could cut something from every department. I know there's a ton of fat to go around, but why is that always the target that conservatives go after first?
Because private entities can take care of that funding better than the government can, in fact. And if you look at like Planned Parenthood, when people were worried about Planned Parenthood funding, they had these private fundraisers step in and give them millions and millions. People, if they care about the services, will donate to them.
Well, it's their Medicaid dollars. Planned Parenthood, I mean, you act like it's a line item in the budget. It's not. It's Medicaid dollars. It's women, mostly minority and lower income, who are going to the clinics that are near them.
But Gary, to the point, we need to step back and decide, being $20 trillion in debt, what is the role of government? Is it helping fund the work of an artist who puts a crucifix in bodily fluid?
Well, this Jessica points out a great example of why the Democrats have such a great marketing strategy. They can point to almost any line item and bring out motherhood, apple pie, the fireman, the policeman, the teacher. They have so many ways to go that pull on our heartstrings. And I get it. Look, it would be great if government handled everything. Why doesn't it fund Major League Baseball, by the way? It funds the arts. Why don't we fund football? Those are important things to kids. In fact, we should fund all the sports. But the problem is, and this is the Democrats always forget, they're great at spending other people's money. We're out of money. We don't have any money. We can't afford these things. As John pointed out, we have deficits as far as the eye can see. We can't afford it. We have to make some cuts somewhere. I'm happy to cut the defense budget, but you can't say, oh, defense, but let's increase Medicaid, which will be out of money. Let's increase Medicare, which will be out of money. Let's not touch Social Security, which will be out of money. In fact, there's not one government program out there that won't go bankrupt in a few years. It's absolutely silly. I'd like the Democrats just once, to take a red pencil to the budget and say, you know what? This can go. They can't do it. They're hoping their grandchildren face the bankruptcy of the United States, not them.
Jess, you want to respond quickly?
Grandchildren are really far down the line for me, so I have no comment.
John, you get the final word then, so Jess isn't worried.
Look, whether the arts are good or whether the arts are bad, it doesn't really matter when you talk about a $4 trillion budget and you're talking about cutting a couple $1 billion. That is absolutely nothing. That's a rounding error. That's not a day's worth of interest expense. 2/3 of the budget right now is Social Security, Medicaid, and debt service. You've got to do something with these entitlements. Doing something with the little bitty small stuff makes people feel good, and it's a good political football, but it does nothing overall.
Well, then you will be starring in the ads of pushing Granny off the cliff. I nominate you. Thanks, guys. Cavuto on Business about 20 minutes from now. Neil, what have you got?
Hey, Dagan, Donald Trump sure sounding a lot like Ronald Reagan after the health care bill passes. What are you saying that as someone here believing, well, he's learning from the Gipper? And funny man Joe Piscopo not laughing at late night funny man Stephen Colbert's comments about our president. Joe's here at the bottom of the hour.
Thanks, Neil. We can't wait. But up here first, a new report says the Obama administration sought intelligence on thousands of Americans during the election year. And now his former national security advisor, Susan Rice, refusing to testify at a hearing about unmasking some Trump aides. Do taxpayers deserve answers?
Live from America's News headquarters in Washington, good Saturday to you. I'm Leland Vittert. We are getting new details about the U.S. Navy SEAL killed in Somalia. Officials say he was on a helicopter helping Somali troops in a raid against al-Shabaab. That's the radical Islamic terror group linked to al-Qaeda, when the entire assault force came under fire. This was the first American combat death in Somalia since Black Hawk Down in 1993. 2 other SEALs were hurt in the gun battle that happened about 40 miles west of the capital of Mogadishu. And in the United States, 10 people have now confirmed to have died from severe flooding in the Midwest. The latest victim, a Missouri man who died when his car was swept into a flooded creek. The heavy downpours started last weekend, hitting Missouri, Arkansas, and Illinois especially hard, and there is more rain on the way. I'm Leland Vittert. Now back to Bulls and Bears.
This might make you feel paranoid. This week, we found out the Obama administration was reportedly asking for intel on thousands of Americans from the NSA last year. And now, his national security advisor, Susan Rice, says she will not testify this coming Monday at a Senate hearing on Russia hacking and unmasking. Gary B. says taxpayers deserve to know what is going on. Gary B.?
Exactly, Dagan. What's going on in 2 regards. One, the specific Susan Rice issue. Look, she requested information on Trump's transition team. Why was she doing that? I mean, yes, she needs to come before Congress, but, and I hate to say this, this is really small potatoes. This is moving the deck chairs around the Titanic kind of thing, because if it's not Susan Rice, it's going to be someone else. The bigger issue is, why does the NSA have this data? Why are the names not redacted? Why can someone from any administration come in and request specific names from the NSA on American citizens? There has to be some oversight. Something is broken down here. That's the bigger issue. Let's tackle Susan Rice, but that's not the main point here.
And John, these people in Washington seem to forget that they answer to us because we pay their salaries and we pay the bills and we're the citizens.
Yeah, they have completely forgot that. And Gary B. is right. You cannot emphasize this point enough. The NSA has been spying on American citizens that have done nothing wrong, and people are able to get these names and use them either internally or externally for political reasons. There is something bad wrong with that. But I agree about Susan Rice not participating in the Senate hearing because coming Monday, because it just becomes a circus about Susan Rice. They're trying to find out in the Senate hearing about the Russians' interference in the election. Susan Rice has said she will testify in a classified hearing. I think this Congress should take her up on that. I think they should get to the roots of this. But I think if you make this into a political football with Susan Rice, I think it detracts from everything that needs to get done.
But don't we deserve to hear what she has to say? And I say we, I mean everybody, Emily. And her excuse was that it wasn't a bipartisan request. It was only from Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, that's sort of the most disappointing part of how Susan Rice responded to Senator Graham's invitation to testify. I mean, if anyone has a reputation for being bipartisan on Capitol Hill, for being fair on Capitol Hill, that's Lindsey Graham. She also issued this sort of weak excuse of saying, well, you didn't give me enough time. That wasn't a professional courtesy. You only gave me 2 weeks' notice. Yet after all this unmasking scandal release, she was perfectly available to do media hits. So to testify in front of the United States Congress, that's pretty important, and it seems a little disrespectful to the people you're serving. Whenever we're talking about really sensitive issues that impact American people's lives, have the decency to come before them. If you're not hiding anything, be straightforward. I mean, I think if she's going to do a classified briefing, that's good as well. But I do also believe the public deserves some answers from Susan Rice, who just last month got 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post fact checker. So she's had some issues with the truth. Just be forthcoming.
Jessica, are these hearings worth our taxpayer dollars?
I think that they are. I think it'll be interesting to hear from Sally Yates and kind of more critical players in this. We heard after the Susan Rice issue about the wiretapping from both Republicans and Democrats that she didn't actually break procedure when she requested to know what was going on inside Trump Tower. And however, that went down. But I do agree with the larger point that obviously we should be talking about how much the NSA knows about us, what they're collecting, who can be requesting this information seemingly at a whim. And I would say that I did think it was a bit curious, though, that the invitation to Susan Rice was only one-sided. And I agree. I'm a big fan of Lindsey Graham, especially in the Trump era, him and John McCain, who I feel have really put country above party in pursuit of understanding what happened with Russian interference in our election. But why wasn't this a bipartisan request? So is that on the fault of the Democrats, or is this something that's really just being pushed by the Republicans so they can get Susan Rice up there and make it about her?
Jonas?
Yeah, I'm with John Layfield on this. Look, if the election was twisted away from Trump and he didn't win because some intelligence agency released a bunch of stuff right before the election with, emails between Trump people and the Russians, yeah, you should take this a little further. But that's not what happened. If anything, that happened to Hillary, who lost for a lot of reasons. So I don't see what the point is. And to the original point is, if you're in one of these many agencies that gets to see all this information, there's no way you wouldn't do that in that job. You're illegally allowed to just go through all this stuff because of all these slippery privacy issues that have gone away over the last, since 2001, since 9/11. I think that's really the issue that the American public isn't aware of. They need to be brought. That's the way we need to have the attention brought to.
They can spend our money however they see fit, and they can go through our records. That's basically what it is. Thanks, guys. Cashing in just over an hour from now. Eric, what do you guys have coming up?
Hi, Dagan. We're interviewing President Trump, his take on the media and fake news, building and paying for the border wall, and a big surprise piece of legislation he'll unveil in a few days. And even Democrats are getting on board. What could that be? You'll find out when the Cashing In sees you at 11:30.
Thanks, Eric. We'll be watching. But up here first, House Democrats and Republicans did come together on something this week. Let's just say this guy isn't going to like it. The House launching its own strike against North Korea this week. Lawmakers voting 419-1 to slap stronger economic sanctions on the country in the wake of its latest missile test. John, will hitting North Korea's regime in the wallet help change its aggressive ways?
It will. And don't you wonder who that one person was thinking that didn't put sanctions on these guys?
I know who it is.
Look, China is 90% of their trading partner. When they started turning back commerce from these guys, this is crushing an already crushed economy. You start cutting down, like in 2005 when they cut down Bank of Delta Asia, Kim Jong-un was not able to pay his top generals. That's the way you get after this guy.
Jonas?
I don't know. We got this place surrounded by anti-missile defense systems already. I kind of like Trump. Got a lot of heat for this about meeting the guy, but I just think this sanction thing is actually going to fix sanction problems that created black markets from the first sanctions. Some of these are about not allowing forced labor exports of goods and services out of this country. Is that even allowed now? That doesn't even make any sense. That exists because we're not doing regular trade with countries around them, and it causes this whole thing which isn't working. It only makes this crazy dictator make his people think that he's at war with America, which he's not really.
Emily, if China helped enforce the sanctions more than they already do, that would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Although they've signaled that they are actually, not interested at all in what the United States has done with this bill. But I will say North Korea has some sneaky ways of sort of getting around sanctions and regulations. And what this does is actually closes some of those loopholes. I like what Congressman Royce was saying, that, we're ratcheting it up to a 5 or a 6. We've got plenty of room to go, North Korea. So we're going to start with squeezing your purse, but, try us. We dare you. That kind of rhetoric is good, I think.
Yeah. Jessica?
No, I think it's a good idea. And we just saw actually recently the Trump administration even came out and said that so far Iran has been cooperating with the deal, and we imposed obviously very tough sanctions on them. So I think it's a great economic tool to use, and I'd love China to be a partner in this, as the Trump administration would. It'd be great to get some definitive clarity there on what it is that they are willing to do going forward to help with that.
Gary B., final word.
Well, I tell you what, we're kind of like the Chicago Cubs in sanctions, how they used to be against North Korea. We've been trying sanctions with them since the 50s. The 50s. Are they better off or worse off now? They're probably, at minimum, they're the same. They're probably worse off. They pose more of a threat. I do agree with John. The sanctions can work if you do the right sanctions. And the only right sanction with North Korea is cutting their offshore funding. That's something we seem unwilling to do. Unless you do that, everything else is a rounding error with these guys.
Amen. And the dude who voted against the sanctions is a Republican from Kentucky. I'll let you figure out who it is. Thank you, Emily and Jessica, for joining us. No matter who wins the Derby, one of our guys says there's one way the fastest 2 minutes in sports can make you a winner all year long. Predictions, Gary B. Go.
Vive la France! I don't even know what that means, by the way. I don't have any idea what's going to happen in the French elections. I do like the France ETF, EWQ. I think it's up 20% in 6 months.
It's Vive la France! By the way, John, your prediction.
John. Colonel Sanders is the real Kentucky hero and probably the greatest military leader of all time. I love fried chicken. Yum Foods up 20% in a year.
Jonas.
I don't have a horse in this Derby race, so I'll tell you, I don't follow sports, that's why. But I do follow cocktail culture, and the mint julep and the whole whiskey thing is a growth area. Brown Furman up 15% in the year.
John, quickly.
Best friend. Perfect.
He's as easy to follow as Mr. Ed.
Thank you, guys. Kneel now.
What a great group of people. And they're not even doing it for the party. They're doing it for this country.
All right. Well, President Trump saying House Republicans are putting country above party for passing that health care measure. That sounds like he's taking a page from the Gipper. Hi, everyone. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto. Well, before President Trump praised lawmakers for putting the nation ahead of their next election, former Senator Phil Gramm was telling me earlier in the week that President Reagan had a similar message more than 30 years ago. Take a look.
The day before the vote, 30 Republicans are uncommitted. Reagan calls them down to the White House. We're all sitting around the cabinet table. And so he says, well, I'm here to listen to you. And so he called on the guy on his right. And the guy on his right said, in essence, I'm with you, but my constituent. Reagan sat there and he didn't say a word for it seemed like 5 minutes. And then he looked at everybody. He said, you know, I was confused. I thought this was about country. I didn't know it was about constituency. And he got up and left. He got up and left. That was the end of the meeting.
How did the vote go?
The next night, we called a roll. We won by 1 vote.
But did you catch that? Before Reagan forced the issue and demanded that they vote, what seemed like 30 no votes magically turned into 30 yes votes. The message and moral being, if you put people on the spot, well, sometimes they can vote a little differently than you think. Well, President Trump seems to have gotten that message. How about everyone else in Washington? We've got Charles Payne here, Charlie Gasparino, Adam Lashinsky, Amy Holmes, and look who's here as well. Joe, no, I'm not running for New Jersey Governor Piscopo. More on that. Ben Stein is off this week lamenting that. And all right, to Charles Payne first on the message you get from the Gipper here that, you know, you could put off and put off and put off, but eventually you got to vote. You got to vote, and better to just get it out there, even if you lose it, than to keep it lingering.
Well, with all due respect to the Gipper, I think elected officials should keep the promises that they make to their constituents. I think this whole notion of going for the greater good hurts, particularly those municipalities, states, and cities where you have very little economic or political clout to begin with. I think this is they send them there to protect what they have. Now, if everyone does that the right way, not talking about looting the joint, but does it in the right patriotic way, things should work out pretty well.
Well, there goes that next shindig of yours at the Reagan Library. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, the Gipper was the best. He was great. You know, keep your enemies close. You know, Tip O'Neill, how great was that, how he did that? He worked it all with that nice little Reagan-esque kind of feel to it. So welcoming. It's the way to get things done. But he was very tough. And wasn't he the most powerful and committed of conservatives, Ronald Reagan?
Well, he was on top of things. You realize, I mean, how intimately involved that President Reagan was in the process and knew everyone's name. And we found out with President Trump in this whole second go-around with healthcare that he was going to master who was on the fence, who he could persuade, and that he got very, very intimately involved, then was the one pushing for the vote that Ronald Reagan was at the time. In other words, look, we can delay and delay until it looks like we have the votes, or just force the issue.
Right, and also we actually need to move forward. We need to reform Obamacare. You had 1 in 5 consumers who weren't even going to only have one choice when it comes to insurers. And with respect to the GIPR, he also said it's amazing what you can get done if you don't have to take credit.
But what did you make of Charles's point? Who trashed Ronald Reagan out of nowhere. But his point being that you are there to meet the needs and wishes of your constituents. Now, Ronald Reagan's approach was, this is bigger than just those constituents.
And he also said it doesn't matter who carries the football, just that you get it, down the field. And Ronald Reagan, he also knew that the president proposes, Congress disposes. So you need to convince all those people, know who you're working with, know their district, know what their, re-election margin was, and whose arms you can twist. And I think Donald Trump is learning from that.
Charlie Gasparino, what do you think?
Well, I would say this. What it shows is that, Donald Trump was a decent businessman, but this world is much more difficult than business. I mean, I covered CEOs. The CEOs with the most self-awareness when I used to talk to them about politics, because they would have all these politicians coming to them and asking for money. They would say, the business world is easy compared to politics. Politics is tough, and it's dirty, and you got to get your hands in there every day. And Donald Trump learned something over the last 100 days. Number one, you can't phone it in. He phoned it in on the healthcare vote. I don't care what anybody says.
On the first one.
On the first one. Right. He did not phone it in on this one.
Well, he entrusted those who work on the Hill, just like John Kennedy entrusted the judgment of generals before the Cuban.
Can't do that. Right? John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy were intimately involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that. I mean,
but my point was they only did that after John Kennedy thought he got schnookered by generals recommending the Bay of Pigs. He learned.
He got schnookered, and he learned. And that you have to be intimately involved. And hopefully the president will keep doing that.
Charles, what I'll also add to that, I used to work for the Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, and his chief of staff told me, who are the most unhappy people in Washington, D.C.? Former CEOs, because you can't just get it done. You have to work with all these coalitions. You have to build all these relationships, and you don't get top down. And I think Donald Trump is learning that.
I'm forgetting something. And Adam, I'm very sorry. I forgot you were here.
I've just been enjoying the conversation immensely.
I'm telling you, that is my bad. You're one of my favorite people on the planet. I ignored you, so I apologize for that. But Adam, your take on this, because to Charlie's point a little while ago about, the politicians can be a lot rougher than that corporate crowd. I mean, this is the same crowd as said, well, thanks to this effort on the part of Republicans, people are going to die. They're murderers, and they're smiling and laughing as they're murdering people. It's very close to actually the kind of crap they said. I mean, what did you think of that?
I think Charlie makes a good point. Politics is nasty. I mean, business is about making money.
That point. It's that particular point. The murdering part. You're killing people.
That's pretty nasty. That's pretty nasty stuff to suggest somebody that they're killing people by withholding a vote. Is that what you're asking?
By voting for removing Obamacare and switching it to their plan. You don't want to talk about this, do you? Maybe it was a mistake to go to you. All right.
Well, Bernie Sanders said it.
Well, Neil, if I might, I don't understand what President Trump said about do this to the country. This was a party line vote. He was saying do this for your country.
As was the last measure, right? The Obamacare itself.
Yes, but
I really regret going to you. I wish I had forgotten.
I'm doing my best, Neil.
Look where he is, San Francisco. What do you expect?
Well, that's the only reason why.
A bunch of hippies out there.
What do you think of that? What he's saying?
Donald Trump's working the phones now. Ronald Reagan worked the phones, man. He worked the phones. He went over. He talked to people. He worked with people. They would have drinks after.
Yeah, that goes against his image. Yeah, that he was this aloof sort of doddering.
Remember the sort of what Reagan did. He cajoled and wooed Tip O'Neill, who was a Democrat. What makes this not quite parallel is that Donald Trump had to woo and cajole people of his own party.
True.
So Reagan had a higher mountain to climb. But I will say this: the tough work comes now. I mean, you brought up the point. The Democrats are now saying that Donald Trump wants to kill people. Bernie Sanders says people are going to die because infants are going to be left in this middle of the street because of this new health care law. Right. I'm telling you, they're saying that. Now he has to go to the American people.
What did they do after this vote, Charles? It was like they were singing like bye-bye.
No, bye. Yeah.
Please don't sing it.
But I got to tell you, here's the thing, though. I think Donald Trump made up to 20 phone calls on this, and you could see in the Rose Garden he was calling guys out by their first names. And what was really interesting about this is he really tried to elevate Paul Ryan, who's been, because he was Paul Ryan.
Who gave him terrible advice the first time
Well, he did,
around.
but he also took the bullet for him. But, this is right. This is the way it's going to have to be, particularly on the Senate side. I mean, he thought it was tough here. It's fewer people, but it's a bigger challenge. It is Republicans on the Senate to buy in. They won't buy into this plan, but to buy into anything.
But I'll tell you, if you're really worried about whether this is going to get through, I mean, listen, there's more to go here. I mean, just think about it. Trump had to go to the mattresses to get the Republicans to.
He doesn't need to do
it. But you know what I think is extraordinary about it?
Adam, what were you saying? I'm sorry, he was something. Go ahead, Adam.
This is the point I was trying to make. All he was able to do was to get people of his own party to support this, which President Reagan didn't have to do. As far as Neil,
by the way, that is all that Barack Obama had to do, and he barely got that in the first vote with health care in 2009 and in the second final vote in 2010. He had a leeway of only like 4 Democrats. I mean, that's not exactly
Husker kickback.
Well, because there were objectionable things in the legislation, as there are.
I know, but my point is, you're making a big deal like this is the first time a president's been up against the wall just trying to win over his own party. It happens again and again.
Well, only comparing it to President Reagan, where we started. And by the way,
I just gave you the President Obama.
Yes, I understand, but President Trump is making phone calls. It's like,
but can I interject? Can I interject for a moment? What I think is really extraordinary about this conversation is we're saying, oh my goodness, politicians are being bipartisan. Isn't this new? It shouldn't be new. President Obama was very partisan. He was known for even not talking to members of his own party. Meanwhile, George Bush Jr., he used to have movie nights on Wednesday where he would bring, leaders from Capitol Hill just to sit there because you know what?
It's that easier. Would be the longest movie.
Well, he would only there every 10 minutes. But you know what?
I'd be happy not to get that invitation.
Right.
But it's easier to do
Gone
a deal.
with the wind. Oh my God.
Part 2.
Yeah.
No, but it's easier to do a deal with someone that you've seen face to face.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah. It's got to go to the Senate. It's got to go to the Senate. They got nothing. They got nothing yet. It's got to go to the Senate. And didn't they just take off 11 days now? Or don't they just take off 11 days?
Joe, what did you think of the little side? It got very little attention.
I agree. If we did
Joe, I'll give you a final word here in this section.
Can you do it in a Ronald Reagan voice?
The president didn't invite the 20 Republicans who voted no. What did you think of that?
I think Donald Trump's Italian. I told you that before. I think he's got an Italian thing why he didn't go to the White House correspondent dinner, and he's letting Obama sear him, and he's just watching, and he sees, and he builds it up, and I think that's exactly.
You're not coming to the White House. Isn't it a pity?
But he doesn't get excited. But what about Donald Trump? He doesn't get excited. It's like, okay, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go with it.
Go ahead.
But he never forgets.
Never forget. All right, when we come back, did late night host Stephen Colbert cross the serious line and jump the shark at the same time just for a laugh? Why? Funny man Joe Piscopo says yes, and it may be President Trump the one having that last laugh after this.
Live from America's News headquarters in Washington, good morning to you. I'm Leland Vittert. A former Texas police officer has turned himself in to face murder charges in the shooting death of a black 15-year-old. Officer Roy Oliver allegedly fired a rifle into a car as it drove away from a party last Saturday night. The bullet killed Jordan Edwards. Oliver has been fired since the shooting. And in other news, country music legend Loretta Lynn has been hospitalized after suffering a stroke. The 85-year-old singer and songwriter was admitted to a hospital in Nashville. According to her website, she's doing well and is expected to make a full recovery. Lynn has been advised by doctors to stay off the road while she recuperates. We're told her upcoming shows will be postponed. I'm Leland Vittert. More news at noon Eastern. In the meantime, back to Cavuto on Business.
I was a little upset with Donald Trump for insulting a friend of mine. So, at the end of that monologue, I had a few choice insults for the president in return. I don't regret that. But while I would do it again, I would change a few words that were cruder than they needed to be.
So was that really an apology? I really couldn't tell, but I did get a chance to ask the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission whether he's looking into the crude comments that Colbert made about the president. this is past 11:30 at night Eastern time, then there are Colbert or any personality on broadcast is free to sort of be a little looser with the language.
Well, the framework that we apply is traditionally certain indecency rules that apply that before 10 p.m. And then again, obscene language is what we regulate after 10 p.m.
What do you think of that?
Colbert is a fine Catholic, church-going, God-fearing young man. How could he do that? I think Donald Trump should take those nuns that he asked to join him to sign that executive order, smack Stephen up.
Do you as a comedian, draw a line between funny? You know, we always and comedians throughout late night have always zinged the president, right?
We're talking about it in the green room in a club.
You never raised it with me.
I get to it.
Sorry, I interrupted something. But go ahead.
Excuse me a second.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I was saying, I was going.
Don't worry about him.
In a club, it's okay. In a club, it's okay. But when you're representing as you said, the Tiffany Network, when you're representing CBS, he's the key guy. You'd never hear Jay Leno say that. By the way, Colbert's a comic genius. He's beyond.
But where did he jump the line, Amy?
I thought he didn't jump the line by being crude, but by being homophobic. That when he was reaching, I use big words. Yeah, when he was reaching for the crudest insult that he could find, he used homophobic imagery.
But didn't
and I think that was the problem. And he was also
went through a lot of sets of eyes, though. A lot of people saw that.
It was
before
pre-taped.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, listen, maybe the Tiffany Network isn't what it used to be, but, my biggest...
Do you hold it to a different standard being on broadcast, regardless of the hour, than, let's say, if we're cable or the internet?
Cinemax.
I thought there was a line between the two, but who knows anymore. But my biggest problem with it was that it took this much rage over the idea that Donald Trump offended one of his friends. Right? It wasn't about a larger issue, the American public or anything else. It was because one of his friends, he had to come to the aid or defense of a buddy.
John Decker's going to face the nation, right?
Yeah, okay. Over that kind of, and using that kind of vulgarity.
He's been far worse to far more people. So I didn't even find that the response equal to what he had said.
But it didn't. He didn't need to respond that way. I mean, it was a nuclear reaction for for Guam, throwing a coconut in the ocean.
But what if it were Barack Obama and the same comments were made?
It would be widespread condemnation.
But Adam, do you think there should be a different standard on broadcast, even late at night, and that it's fine to say crazy things and go after people, all the hosts do, but that went a little too far?
Well, I think if he goes too far, it's going to hurt him in the marketplace. His viewers won't like it, and so I don't think we need to be concerned about it.
But his viewers do like it. His ratings have picked up since he's gone on this, right?
But I do think that vulgar entertainers should stay out of politics.
Yeah. Okay, let's...
Where does that leave us?
Right here. SNL is late night. They wouldn't have gone as far as Stephen went.
Really?
Yeah.
What does that say right there? All right, guys, in the meantime, how much former President Obama is making, even if he's making a ton, it's none of your business. The message that isn't resonating with Charlie Gasparino, especially from whom it is coming after this.